All right, welcome back. Jeff Marshall here. Let's add another triad into our sound to get another nice coloration to our major pentatonic. All right, so far we've established the root. We're playing in the key of C, so finding those little C major triads within the C major pentatonic so we can kind of get back home if we need to. We also talked about playing a minor up a whole step, which adds that sus4 note and also gives you all kind of the colorations or the upper structures. Now, when you play a C major 7th chord, you may or may not have recognized this, but built right into that C major 7th chord is an E minor triad. And that E minor triad is the thing that's giving you that major 7th, in this case a B note. So in this case we can play a minor triad. Now this is playing over a major chord. If we want to get that major 7th note in there, we can play a minor triad from the major 3rd. Okay, so if we're playing in the key of C, the major 3rd is E. So then right here I have a minor triad. And that's baked right into my C major pentatonic. All right, and then we have another octave of it right here. Here's E right here. And you can see it really outlines that major 7th note. This can be really great just to kind of highlight that note and get back into your root sound, that C major sound. Sometimes playing the C major or the major 7th note, leaning on it too much can sound a little bit too much. So, you know, use your ear. Everybody's different. You can kind of decide. But of course, now we have a nice structure that we can play around with. We can rearrange the notes. We can add some of that chromaticism in there. When you're first trying to tackle this and you're trying to bleed it into your playing, like we've talked about before, maybe you want to break it up into 2 octaves and add it in with that C major pentatonic so you can kind of get back into that root sound again. And it just becomes an extension of that shape. Same thing here. Maybe I want to play this E minor triad here and then blend it in with some of my C major pentatonics. Even that little kind of C major blues thing that we were talking about. And that way it just becomes another structure that's within there. Now what you'll notice here is when we add you know, the minor from the 2 like we talked about, the D minor, and we add the E minor, eventually we get all of the notes of the key of C. The difference is we actually have some structures that we can build up a vocabulary with, and we have some structures that highlight certain tones. So in this case, the E minor really highlights that major 7th note. Of course, like we mentioned, the D minor really highlights that sus4. That gives us all of the notes of the C major scale, but again, we're not playing it as a linear scale, and we have some structures that we can build up a vocabulary with. All right, let's take a look at where the E minor triad is in the next position or the next box we've been working in, which is up here. There's our C major pentatonic. We've got an E minor chord right here, so that should help me see some of those E minor. And that really gives me a nice C major 7th sound. And I can get back into that C major pentatonic. Again, you might want to do some exercises where you're blending it in with a C major pentatonic. So right there I played a little inversion of it. So, you know, some little exercises where you're kind of combining it with that pentatonic so you can develop a relationship with it. And then, of course, just like some of the other things we've talked about, rearranging the notes and getting creative with it, adding some half steps here and there before the triads, even around the triads sounds great, and then getting it back into that root sound. So this is very clever. Sometimes, again, if I'm playing over a C major 7th chord, you know, most people are just going to go right for that C major scale. And, you know, the C major scale, I'm not saying you can't play it. It's great. I use it, of course. But, you know, what I want to do is I want to be able to come up with some lines and also be able to play things that specifically highlight certain notes. When you're playing a scale, all the notes kind of just become run into each other and nothing really gets too highlighted. Kind of all the notes are equally created, I suppose. So when you play these triads, it really kind of highlights a certain sound. So I'm going to explore that a little bit over that C major groove and see if we can get that E minor triad and combine it with some of my C major sounds. Let's do it. Okay, in this case, you know, the backing track is really just kind of a C major chord, so that C major 7th would, you know, be a little bit more prominent if the C major 7th chord was being played, and I believe the backing track is just a C major triad chord. So might not always be the best choice if you're just playing against a C major triad, but if it's a C major 7th chord, you definitely want to get that major 7th note in there, and you can do that fantastically with a minor triad from the 3rd of the chord in general. All right, so some of the strategies I was trying to take there, again, trying to just blend it in with my major pentatonic, rearranging some of the notes, also using some little half steps to play around with it. So like, for example, right here, you see that little idea I did there, which is basically just seeing that E minor triad and just kind of moving into it with a half step and then resolving it to the root sound back into that C major. Now I could potentially do that with any note of the triad. I could play. So right there I'm seeing just that piece of that triad, and I could go a half step into that. I could do it with this note. Right? So sliding into, if you want to sound just a little jazzy without, you know, learning a bunch of jazz scales, you just take this approach and you're going to get some of that chromaticism in there nicely, and it's going to sound a little bit more smooth, a little bit jazzy if you want to sound that way. And it's just a real clever way to get some chromatics into your playing. I'm going to play through it one more time, and I'm just going to kind of lean a little bit more on some of these chromatics and take a few more liberties so you can potentially hear what is possible with seeing some of these structures and also adding some of the chromatic notes around them. Let's check it out. All right, cool. So definitely taking a few more liberties with chromaticism, playing little lines, just seeing one note. Like, for example, I see this note and I see this note, and I'm just kind of making one of them a destination. If I play from this note to this note, I can just go chromatically, or vice versa. So this is just a real clever way to get a little bit of chromaticism into your playing. Might have been overdoing it a little bit there, but just to kind of give you an example of some of the possibilities. Really easy to throw this kind of stuff in there. You're not having to think of a whole nother scale or a whole nother structure. You just see these basic structures and you can put a little bit of chromaticism around it and get a little bit more jazzy vibes if that's what you're looking for. All right, that's it for this one. We're going to keep adding to it, so stay tuned and I will see you in the next one.